The wind came first, dry and hot as breath from a kiln, rattling the dry stalks of corn that had once been the pride of the ND Canyon. Then came the silence. No birds, no insects. Only the creak of parched earth splitting open like old hide. The village dogs lay in the shade of the ramada, tongues lolling, too weak even to chase flies. Children who used to race between the adobe houses now sat listlessly, their ribs showing like the ribs of the dying cattle. Taza watched from the doorway of his empty wickiup. He had built it for three, Najoni, Chodi, and himself. Now it held only the echo of their laughter, and the faint scent of sage she used to burn at dusk. 3 winters since the fever took them, 3 winters of walking farther and farther, as if distance could outrun memory. He was 34 summers, lean as a mesquite branch, with a scar across his left cheek earned from a mountain lion when he was 16. The elders called him Joey, the quiet one, because he spoke only when the words had weight. Tonight the words in his chest were heavier than any he had ever carried. Chief Nayati's voice carried across the plaza, council fire at moonrise. Taza did not need to attend. He already knew what would be said. The wells were down to a handspan of muddy water. The last rain had been a cruel tease, 6 drops that hissed into steam before touching the ground. The people would have to choose, stay and die or leave the canyon that had cradled the ND for 12 generations. Taza slipped away before the council began. He took his bow of ironwood, a quiver of 20 arrows fletched with turkey feathers, his obsidian knife, and a goatskin canteen with 1 swallow left. He wore the same buckskin shirt he had worn the day Nijoni died. The bloodstain had faded to rust, but he could not bring himself to wash it out. Under a sky salted with stars, he walked north, past the last sentry post, past the prayer sticks planted by the grandmothers, into the open desert where even coyotes feared to sing. He walked until the moon bled silver across the dunes. The ground was a map of cracks. Every footfall raised a puff of dust that hung in the air like smoke. He was tracking a mule deer, its prints deep splayed, the sign of a heavy buck. But the trail veered suddenly, crossed by something lighter. Dog prints, not the splay-footed marks of the village curs, but narrow, purposeful, the pads deep and the claws sharp. Wild dog, or wolf. Taza crouched, touched the track. The edges were crisp. The animal had passed within the hour. It was moving fast, straight north toward the broken country where the pines began. Taza hesitated only a heartbeat. Deer could wait. A sign was a sign. He followed. Dawn found him in the foothills. The saguaros gave way to juniper and piñon, then to ponderosa pine whose trunks rose straight as lodge poles. The air cooled. His breath plumed. The dog prints never wavered. They crossed a dry wash, climbed a ridge of red sandstone, descended into a narrow valley where a trickle of water, real water, had carved a green ribbon through the stone. Taza knelt, cupped his hands, drank. It tasted of iron and snowmelt. He filled his canteen, then noticed the prints had changed. The dog had paused here, circled, then veered sharply west toward a stand of cottonwoods whose leaves shivered though there was no wind. Taza followed the shiver. The cabin appeared without warning, half swallowed by the earth. Its roof had collapsed inward, forming a shallow crater. Adobe walls leaned like drunks. A single cottonwood grew through what had once been the doorway, its roots splitting the threshold. The dog prints ended at the splintered door. Taza knocked an arrow but did not draw. He listened. Nothing. No birds, no insects, only the creak of the cottonwood in the breeze. He stepped inside. The interior smelled of damp earth, mouse droppings, and something metallic. Shafts of light pierced the broken roof, illuminating dust motes that drifted like slow snow. In the center of the single room sat the dog. It was larger than any dog Taza had seen, shoulder-high, lean as a wolf but with the broad chest of a mastiff. Its coat was silver gray, tipped with black, and its eyes were the color of late autumn sun on water. It regarded Taza without fear or aggression, tail curled neatly over its paws. Taza lowered his bow. Shiunisuni. "You are beautiful," he said in ND. "What do you guard?" The dog rose, padded to the far corner, and began to dig. Dirt flew between its hind legs. Taza watched, then knelt to help. Beneath a foot of packed earth lay a wooden box the length of his forearm, bound with rusted iron straps. The dog sat back on its haunches, tongue lolling as if to say, "Your turn." The lid was swollen with moisture. Taza pried it with his knife. Inside, wrapped in oilskin gone brittle with age, was a leather-bound journal and a metal tube the thickness of a wrist, etched with symbols that hurt to look at directly, spirals within spirals, lines that seemed to move when he blinked. The journal's pages were vellum, the ink faded to sepia. The handwriting was not Spanish, not English, not the pictographs of the Hohokam. It was something older, angular, each stroke deliberate as a flint knapper's. Sketches filled the margins. A canyon that looked disturbingly like home, a spring marked with a star, a canal snaking through mountains, and at the center a circle containing a single word in Nade, Twechomi, dog star. Taza's pulse quickened. The dog nosed the tube, then the journal, then sat, ears pricked toward the door. A message clear as speech, take these. Follow me. Taza tucked both into his satchel. When he turned to thank the dog, it was gone. Only its paw prints remained, leading out the back wall through solid adobe, as if the animal had walked through stone. He followed the prints anyway. They circled the cabin, crossed a dry creek bed, and climbed a talus slope to a ledge overlooking the valley. There the prints stopped. In their place was a single hawk feather, still warm. Taza tied it into his hair. He knew the way home now, though he did not yet know why. The journey back took 2 days. He rationed the snow-melt water, chewed pine nuts he found in a squirrel cache, slept in the lee of boulders. On the second night he dreamed of Nizoni. She stood at the spring in the sketch, water pouring from her cupped hands. But when he reached for her, the water turned to sand and she crumbled with it. He woke gasping, the hawk feather brushing his cheek. At dawn on the third day, he crested the ridge above the canyon. Smoke rose thin and gray from the village. Too little for cooking fires, too much for signal. He ran. The plaza was chaos. Nyati stood on the kiva roof, arms raised, trying to calm a crowd. Genoa knelt beside a child whose lips were blue. The last well had collapsed during the night. The muddy water was gone, and with it the final hope. Someone saw Taza and shouted. The crowd parted. He felt every eye like a brand. Nyati descended, face carved with exhaustion. You left without word. We thought the desert took you. Taza opened his satchel. The journal and tube gleamed in the morning light. The desert gave me these. He told them everything, the dog, the cabin, the impossible paw prints, the dream. When he finished, silence fell thicker than dust. Then Shinoa took the journal. Her fingers trembled as she turned pages. These are not Hohokam. They are Anasazi, older than the cliff dwellings, older than song. This symbol, she tapped the dog star, is the mark of the water keepers. They built the great canals before the world cracked. Nyati examined the tube. It was warm, though the air was cold. And this? I do not know, Taza admitted. But the dog wanted me to bring it. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Superstition warred with desperation. Finally, Nyati spoke. We have 7 days of water left in the emergency jars. After that, the children die first. Taza will take 3 warriors and follow the map. If he fails, we leave the canyon at the dark of the moon. The chosen were Kiona, 19 summers, best archer in the tribe, eyes like chipped obsidian. Jalen, Taza's cousin, tracker whose nose could find water and stone. And Doba, broad as a bear, quick to anger but loyal as stone. They left at first light, each carrying a waterskin, pemmican, and a prayer tie of cedar and sage. The tube rode in Taza's hand wrapped in doeskin. The map showed the spring 30 miles north, past the pine forest, into a range marked with the sign for forbidden. Legends said the mountains ate men. Taza did not believe in eating mountains, only in thirsty children. They traveled light and fast. Yona ranged ahead, arrow nocked. Jalen read the land like a book. Doba carried the heaviest pack without complaint. On the second night, they camped in a cave where ancient hands had painted spiral mazes on the walls. Taza touched one and felt the tube vibrate, a low thrumming like a distant drum. That night he dreamed again. This time the dog stood on a stone bridge over a river of stars. It spoke without moving its mouth. The key opens what was closed. The price is memory. He woke with the hawk feather stuck to his lips. On the 4th day they reached the pine forest. The air smelled of resin and lightning. The map's lines grew dense, converging on a canyon within a canyon. They followed a game trail that narrowed to a knife edge. Below, a dry riverbed twisted like a snake's corpse. Kiona spotted the first sign. A stone cairn, waist-high, topped with a hawk feather identical to Taza's. Someone had been here recently. They descended. The riverbed ended at a sheer cliff pocked with caves. In the largest cave mouth lay the remains of a fire, charred pine knots still warm. Jalen knelt, touched the ashes. Less than a day, Doba growled. Bandits? Or guardians, Chenoa would have said. Taza unwrapped the tube. It glowed faintly, the etched symbols crawling like ants. He pointed it at the cave. A low hum filled the air, and a slab of stone ground aside, revealing a tunnel. Cool, damp air breathed out, carrying the scent of water. They entered. The tunnel sloped downward, walls slick with moss. After 50 paces, it opened into a cavern vast as the sky. In the center, a spring bubbled from a crack in the bedrock, forming a pool clear as glass. Above it, carved into the dome, was the dog star, inlaid with turquoise, now black with age. Kiona whooped. Doba splashed his face. Jalen traced the canal that led from the pool, stone-lined, precisely engineered, stretching into darkness. Taza approached the carving. The tube grew hot. He pressed its crystal end to the star. A click, a rumble. The pool's surface rippled, though there was no wind. From the canal's mouth, water began to flow, slow at first, then faster. A silver ribbon racing into the tunnel. But the tube was not done. Its symbols flared white. Taza's vision tunneled. He saw the canyon as it had been 1,000 years ago. Green fields, children laughing, a woman with Mijoni's face singing as she ground corn. Then the vision cracked. The fields burned. The woman aged to dust. The price is memory. He staggered. Kiona caught him. What did you see? Everything we might lose, he whispered. They followed the water. The canal ran straight as a spear, carved through solid rock in places, buttressed with cedar beams in others. Every 100 paces, a valve of bronze green with verdigris waited for the tube. Taza turned each one. Water roared louder. By nightfall, they emerged into a hidden valley ringed by cliffs. The canal continued, plunging into a notch that pointed south toward home. They camped beside the flow. Stars wheeled overhead. Taza could not sleep. The tube lay cold now, its light extinguished. He feared what it had taken. At dawn, they began the repair. Centuries of flash floods had collapsed sections. Landslides had buried others. They dug with antler picks, levered boulders with pine trunks, rebuilt walls with stones fitted without mortar. Kiona hunted deer. Doba hauled water to mix mud for chinking. Jalen scouted ahead, marking weak points. On the third day, they found the source of the warm ashes, a camp of 3 men, ragged, armed with trade muskets. They wore the remnants of Mexican uniforms. Deserters, or worse. They had followed the same legends, seeking the spring to sell its water to mining camps. A tense parley? Taza offered alliance. The leader, a scarred tenient named Vargas, laughed and raised his musket. Kiona's arrow took him through the throat before the hammer fell. The others dropped their weapons. They were conscripted. The ND had no slaves, but they had labor. The deserters worked under Doba's watchful eye, their fear stronger than chains. On the 7th day, the canal was whole. Water raced through it, a living thing, laughing over stones. Taza stood at the notch and watched it disappear toward the canyon 30 miles away. He felt hollow. The tube was dark, the journal's pages now blank, as if the story had been erased once read. The deserters were sent south with a single water skin and a warning. The ND began the journey home. They moved slowly, following the canal, reinforcing weak spots, clearing debris. At night, they sang to the water, thanking it for returning. On the 10th day, they crested the final ridge. Below, the canyon spread like a green wound in the red desert. The arroyo, dry for a year, now carried a steady stream. Corn leaves glistened. Children ran along the banks, splashing. The village erupted in cries. Zuyati met them at the edge, eyes wet. You brought back the world. That night, the feast lasted till dawn. Deer roasted on mesquite coals. Drums echoed off the cliffs. Genoa danced with the journal. Its pages filled again, this time with ND words. The story of the dog and the water. Taza stood apart, watching the fire. The hollow place inside him had not filled. He slipped away, climbed to the rimrock. The moon was full, a silver coin. He unwrapped the tube. It was cold iron now, symbols faded to scratches. He raised it to the dog star, nothing. Then a soft pad of paws on stone. The dog sat beside him, silver in the moonlight. Its eyes held the canyon, the feast, the children, everything Taza had saved. What did you take? He asked. The dog leaned against his leg, warm as sun-baked stone. Memory, it seemed to say, but not yours. Taza closed his eyes. He saw Nizoni laughing, Chodi chasing grasshoppers. The images were sharp, painful, perfect. The price had been the world's memory of them. In exchange, they lived in him alone. He wept without sound. The dog licked a tear from his cheek, then trotted into the dark. Taza did not follow. Years passed. The canal never failed. The ND prospered. Taza taught the children to read the land, to listen for the dog in the wind. He grew old, hair white as saguaro bloom, but his eyes stayed young. On the night of every full moon, he climbed the rim rock with a bowl of water and a hawk feather. He poured the water onto the stone, watching it soak in. Sometimes the dog came, sometimes only the wind. The people told the story differently each time. How the quiet one followed a ghost dog to a lost spring. How he paid with memories no one else could carry. How the water still sang his name in the dark. And in the canyon the corn grew tall, the children laughed, and the desert for once was kind.